Welcome everyone to the festival preview of the 5th Singapore Literature Festival in NYC. Organized by Singapore Unbound, a New York City-based literary nonprofit, the biennial Singapore Literature Festival brings together authors and audiences for lively readings and conversations about literature and society. This year, we're so happy to partner with the People's Forum, the Evergreen Review, PN Review, NYU's Post-Colonial Race and Diaspora Studies Colloquium, and Asian Pacific American Institute, Singapore's Ethos Books, and the Asian American Writers Workshop to bring you this festival. We also gratefully thank Brianna Barber and Dresden Lamar from Pro Bono ASL for providing ASL interpretation for this event. The festival theme this year is Archipelago Dreaming. As the world becomes ever more interconnected and interdependent, the ideas of the Martinican writer and philosopher, Edouard Glissant, become even more relevant. Calling for a change in our thinking, Glissant writes, and I quote, "We need archipelagic thinking, which is one that opens, one that confirms diversity, one that is not made to obtain unity, but rather a new kind of relation, one that trembles physically, geologically, mentally, spiritually, because it seeks the point, that utopian point at which all the cultures of the world, all the imaginations of the world can meet and understand each other without being dispersed or lost." End quote. What kinds of writing answer that kind of call, that counter the confining boundedness of ethno-nationalistic imaginations, but do not play into the hands of global capital? What kinds of movement or development enrich all lives, and not just some at the expense of others? The 5th Singapore Literature Festival in NYC poses these momentous questions and invites featured writers to answer them. The writers come from different archipelagos, Southeast Asian and the Caribbean, and other parts of the world that may be productively reimagined as such. To preview the festival, we're so pleased to present a specially commissioned video work by Singaporean artists Lidah and bani haykal. This provocative new video work, Suap, Lidah, or French Kiss, presents the themes and raises the questions that we hope the festival will answer. First, an introduction to our two artists. A visual and performance artist, Lidah incorporates objects, moving images, and live performances into her intimate works, using her body as a space of tension, negotiation, and confrontation. Her works generate discussion about gender, history, and identity. Lidah has shown her work in many places, including the National Gallery, Singapore. Next, an artist and musician, Bani haykal experiments with text and music. His research has culminated in works of many forms, encompassing installation, poetry, and performance. He has participated in festivals all over the world, in Japan, Austria, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Singapore. We are really so honored to have them create a new work for us. We now present their new video work for the festival, Suap, Lidah, or French Kiss. This video is best viewed in standard view, which you can find on the top right corner of your Zoom screen. After the video, the artist will join us live from Singapore for a Q&A. The video runs for about 13 minutes. Enjoy.
Arahkan ku mengarah arahan
Arahkan ku mengarah
pengarah
arahan
Ar-Rahmanir
pengarah
Rahim.
Ar-Rahman ni
Syarahan
Rahim.
berkumandang arah
Syarahan
tujuan tak
berkumandang
tentu
arah tujuan tak tentu
diarahkan
ke sana
ke
mana?
mana
Ke rahmatullah.
rahmatullah.
Lidah tak
Lidah
berarah
tak berarah berkisar bersiar-siar ku pandang.
You turned to me last night and asked, how do you say tempo in
Context, I asked, although it doesn't matter.
in our tongue? There's many ways to say one thing, and there's many things that remain unsaid. But in this
Lidah penjajah stretched
out a stronger muscle, parasite, paralyzed.
Lidah aku tak pernah bertulang.
Bendalu, I answered. It sounds like bendalu.
Your thing, your tongue.
Parasit. Sit apa? Sit down. Down apa? Downfall. Fall apa? Fallen. Ke arah mana-mana putaran bahasa yang tak terarah merunda berjelingan manja dengan saya. We could not agree on the word for translator. I exclaimed, Jema, but I stopped myself.
Eternal sunshine of the spotless machines.
Even if the accuracy is kind of questionable, it's actually
Terjemah.
The ter as part of the noun and not a kata imbuhan. Ter indicate a lack of control, like
Terjatuh,
which is to fall,
tertinggal,
to be left behind. Indicate something sudden,
terbangun,
wake up. Indicate something of the highest position,
tercantik,
prettiest. Not to be confused with secantik.
to be on par.
Terjemah indicates something sudden, of the highest position, with a lack of control.
Traditore,
The translator is a traitor. All translations are a compromise. You instead settle for juru bahasa. I found the word juru to be unsettling.
hubris,
Are we meant to be experts?
like jururawat, nurse, or juru terbang, pilot.
But sayang, no one should be an expert of any language. Keep it loose, careful, secantik, sesama, sama-sama. There will be a day, sayang, where terima kasih will be replaced by an awkward Anglophile.
Saya thank awak.
Directed,
Pointed, defined.
But terima kasih is so ambiguous. Accept my love as I accept yours. Sama-sama.
Sama. Arahanmu yang perintahi,
Hidup susah, mati pun susah.
muat turun ke hayalan.
Lancang kuning menentang badai.
Tempoh masa kini, tempoh
Temporary. Temper. Tempoh.
hari yang takkan jumpa.
Tempoh paling lama. Masa bertumpang lalu.
Nanti ke mana arah?
Raja, rakyat, raksasa.
Masa depan kami dibuat.
Buat apa?
Lupa lidah ini
Buat bodoh.
kesat.
1, 2, 3 lesak.
Kesatkan mata. Tanda mata. Tanda petanda menandakan
buta
tanda
tanya?
tanya. Tanda tangan ini
Siapa yang
ringan
buta?
ambil semula.
Dah lama macam gini actually. Nyata that the only pertandingan is between you and yours. Ambil lah semua. Kanina
Apa yang
janji baik.
dirampaskan oleh sejarah
Yang
saya.
bukan saya punya.
Bahasa indah kerana
Bahasa indah kerana
bersejarah berdampingan.
berdampingan dengan lidah mereka.
Penjajah, saudara mara
Saudara
dan
mara
jurubahasa yang idamkan
dan jurubahasa
menjilat
yang
merasakan
idamkan
alam
menjilat,
budaya.
Merasakan alam budaya.
Seberang masa rasa dengan berat hati saya
Rasa arah tujuan yang harus
diperiksakan adalah hasil penjajahan yang merombakkan nilai lidah saya.
Nilai lidah saya.
Tiada kata secantik bahasa. And yet you always tell me, mulut kau masin.
Mulut kau memang masin.
And I wonder if you mean the salt of the sea, old salt.
No.
The same way that you say, aku dah rasa garam.
Aku dah rasa garam sebelum kau. But what I meant was, do not say these things.
Keep those words loose like threads between teeth.
Carefully.
Hati-hati.
When they spill out of me.
Mulut masin ada rasa.
Premonition. Instinct. Foresight.
You bisik nanti tanda.
You bisik nanti
And all I
tanda.
hear is tender.
All I hear
Of a ship
is tender.
leaning or readily inclined to roll in response.
to the wind.
dipaksa, diperintah, dihalau dari masa kini tempoh hari hingga ke masa depan, ambil rasa suara gemuruh yang biadab beradat hanya dengan dendam, benci, berdendam, muka bersenyum, niat pecahkan mukamu terpendam. Maaf, jangan panggil peguam. Bahasaku walaupun kesat, aku cuma nak mengesat apa yang kau lepaskan di kalangan minda ini.
Bila-bila berhembus maya dan angin saja ke mana jiwa ternakan nak cuba jangan arahan arahku, arahkan arah kita semangat dengan merantau lidah sentiasa sehari kita. Kisah-kisah mengarah untuk impian dengan serta berenang mesra, bergaul biasa sesuara. Terjajah tak arah, tak ada kerana ini lidah kalangan kau yang apa mengesat nak cuma aku kesat walaupun basuh peguam panggil jangan maaf pendam niat bersenyum muka berpulang benci dendam hanya beradat biadab yang gemuruh suara rasa ambil panas hari tempoh kini masa dan halau diperintah dipaksa ditambah.
Bahasa indah kerana tak ada arah, tak dijajah secara biasa, bergaul mesra, berenang bergurau senda dengan impian untuk mengarah kisah-kisah kita. Sehari, sentiasa, lidah merantau dengan semangat kita arah-arahkan ku mengarah arahan pengarah. Jangan cuba nak ternakkan jiwa ini yang ingin kemana saja angin dan maya berhembus bila-bila.
Thank you so much, Ela and Bani, for this fantastic video work, Suap, Lidah, or French Kiss. I want to ask all to give them all a round of applause from wherever you are. Mesmerizing work. The first time I watched the video, I had such a visceral reaction to it. It made me feel physically uncomfortable. It repulsed me and it drew me in. It spoke to me and it dismissed me. The overall effect was to make me want to watch it again and again. So thank you. When I first approached Ela to make a video work for the festival, I had in mind Ela making a video work that responded to a poetic text that I would give her. She would have the creative freedom, of course, to make what she wanted, but my idea would still have prioritized the text before the image. What makes Suap Lidah so extraordinary, I think, is the way it melded image and word together, sometimes in consonance, more often in dissonance. Ela, could you describe for us the process of making Suap Lidah? What came first for you? Was it the words or the images first? And where do these words and images come from?
Okay, thank you. So Bani and I talk a lot about Malay words, how we use them colloquially, how they have fallen out of use, etymology of English words, and the lack of etymology for Malay words. We take pleasure in these meanderings as we peel off the layers. One example would be the word orbit, to denote someone with strange fashion taste. And Bani told me it could be derived from offbeat. I thought that given the whole theme of this festival, that these conversations could be weaved into the work. This inquisition, a negotiation in the dilution of the Malay language. So Bani started off with 5 to 6 pieces, and I wrote a response and an individual piece. I wanted to create vignettes, visual poetry of sorts that pays attention and falls into all the wordless feelings, gestures, nuances of what being Malay is, to trigger the same visceral wordlessness for the viewers of the work.
Yes, I think visual poetry is such a great way of actually describing the video work. Thank you for that. Bani, would you like to add anything to what Ela said about the process of making Suap Lidah?
So a lot of our fascination with language, specifically Malay, started years back when we were talking about science fiction and the future, and how in Malay there isn't a word which means the future, but a phrase, masa depan, or time ahead. So where that got me thinking about conceptions of time. Ela and I have this subject and conversation open about how we orientate our encounters and lived experiences through language, and in our case, Malay. So Suap Lidah is a point in this conversation where our interest in translation, or the inability to translate what gets lost in translation, and I think more importantly, who translates or whose translation matters, is what we're thinking through with Suap Lidah.
Thank you so much, Bani. I think you raised a very important question, that when we read a translation or we watch a translation, we could ask the question, who is the translator, right? Who are we really listening to? What is perhaps added, and also perhaps what is lost? In the first section of the video, arah, which may be translated as direction, I'm struck by your idea that the tongue has no direction. What you mean, I think, is we don't know how our words would mean to our listeners. We cannot direct our words so accurately that we can determine what our listeners would hear. At the same time, this section presents close-ups of both your mouths and tongues, almost directing us to look at them closely. How do the gestures, the movements of the mouth and the tongue in this section reinforce, modify, or even contradict what you're saying?
So when I think of language, I think of this embodiment, how meanings bear the same or the most weight, and then one loses all the details in this exchange. The way these mouths stretch the words out, forming them into sounds. The little hesitations, the curve of a smile forming, the silence in between. I wanted that this embodiment to be felt not as a way to misdirect, but with reference to ara, a kind of redirection, an invitation of sorts to look deeply into small gestures, to feel them and hold them as close as the meanings that they carry.
Right, that is really interesting. Because it's true, very often when we think of language or when we're using language, we are thinking in the abstract. We don't really focus so much on the mouth or the tongue and how we have to use these parts of our bodies to make the sounds that we do. Yeah, Bani, would you like to add to that?
The opening stanza basically plays with the various possible meanings and usage and sound related to the word arah. Quite literally, to let the word arah stretch to as many different directions as possible. Arah means direction. So I think for me personally, it is very exciting and maybe even important to have a vocabulary that is unfixed, playful, and surprising in its usage. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the subject of who translates is something that's important to think through. This frame is central to this work. I hope you forgive me for not wanting to explain what the line means. But a lot of what I'm thinking about in relation to language is about both what is obscured in translation and by whom, and what it means to encounter these translations.
No, so interesting. Bani, I love what you said about the playfulness of language, not wanting language to be fixed, right? Because if we are playful with language, then we're not really owning it or possessing it for ourselves. We don't claim any authority over it, but we're just like, I guess, maybe children in a sandbox, right? Playing with the language and having a good time with one another, right? Rather than telling each other, you are saying this correctly or you're saying this wrongly. So I really do love that idea. Now, in the second section of the video, Sesama, you give different Malay words for the word translator. You reject the translation, juru bahasa, because juru means expert, and you're wary of any claims to expertise in a language. Instead, you opt for the word terjama, the word ter indicating a lack of control, something sudden, and yet of the highest position. Would you like to elaborate on why you're so wary of claims of expertise in a language?
So this is actually based on a real conversation that Bani and I had, because both of us couldn't agree on the Malay word for translator, and so I wrote it into a piece. So in response to your question, I think wary is not the word. That a definition set into a translation can be so limiting. When one is an expert of language, does it also mean that one stops asking or looking for other meanings that these lines, words, sentences, stories, histories might potentially hold, or in this case, withhold? And so for us to push it to terjemah, I felt it in my mind that I was sort of speculating that whoever came up with this word is also saying that a translation can be accidental or sudden, and it may also mean a kind of purity, or in this case, the best, or the highest position. So I use the word ter to speculate the origin of the word terjemah, as though the same is calling a translation traitorous to the actual meaning. Nothing can be translated in purity, and that there is also the beauty of it, and for that no one can be an expert in any language because of its nature, its fluidity, and its fallibility to change.
Yes, I think that's really such an important point, isn't it, Ila? That when one claims to be an expert in a language, one stops asking questions, right, about all the other possible meanings, all the other possible etymologies of a word, the stories even behind the word. Bani, what do you think?
Okay, this is personal. For me, this is partly to do with how it was extremely not pleasurable having to study Malay language in school. It almost felt pointless to learn this formal version of the language when I don't speak like that at all. So actually, I also hated learning English because there's no joy in anything. I find more pleasure communicating with others through text or speaking or just sharing space, which opens up other ways of how people use languages broadly. So I think basically the whole thing about language and authority for me is kind of the lack of imagination in the way we communicate, play, and also exchange ideas through it. So like, yeah, in school it is just so rigid, sterile, and pointless. Yeah, so fuck authority. Whoever tells you, you are saying things wrongly or whatever, people understand one another in whatever way they choose to use the languages they have. I think that's okay.
Yeah, as a school teacher myself, I feel very convicted by what you said. That sometimes, there is not enough joy, all right, in learning in school. And that is something that we always want to do, right? To actually include joy in our learning wherever we are. If I can ask both of you a final question. In the fourth section of the video, Sentiasa, you remind us that translation can be used to oppress a people. And so in return, language can be wielded as a tool for vengeance on the oppressor. The oppressor may judge the language of the oppressed as vulgar, but they often refuse to acknowledge that their own language is full of what you call so ironically cultured vulgarities. What are some of these cultured vulgarities that you have had to confront and may still have to confront today?
So Sentiasa is really the anomaly out of the four because Bani wrote it and I kept it intact as an individual piece. So when we perform it, I read the text in reverse and the meaning changed, not so much opposite to the original, but more like a parenthesis, like a bracket. So as this piece was written in Malay, I did the translation on Google Translate. So cultured vulgarities was something that Google Translate came up with, and so Sentiasa, which means always, is a framing of my own relationship with the Malay language when I try to give it in such a lazy way. Of course, after the piece was done, it became a different piece altogether. And so the oppressor here, I feel when I was looking at the piece again, is a rumination of myself. I feel oppressed by the lack of, but also sort of weight from this lack. Cultured vulgarities is that essentially for me, not taking time to understand a language, my mother tongue especially, and just recklessly opting for the widely accepted translation, strangely generated from a machine. So, just a little bit more, I feel like it's interesting that you sort of translated the piece that way, because I feel like the beauty of this piece is that different people can come in to translate it in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. We all, enter into your piece, right, from different places. It's so interesting to me that you used Google Translate to translate, the Malay and then to actually read out the English text, all right, in that way. Because I know I very often go to Google Translate, knowing that it is not going to be very accurate, but it is so convenient, right? And for you to compare it to a kind of self-oppression right? We are really oppressing ourselves, right, by using the machine just for the sake of convenience. I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah, Bani, you want to add on?
Sure, did you want to?
Yeah, but we're also freed by this lack of. So it's not just like being oppressed, but also having that space to freely translate as well. So it can be both, depending on how your headspace is at. Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to the point on who translates. And here we see Google Translate operating as part of the machinery that built this work. Even when I think of the phrase cultured vulgarities, it's an awkward and strange phrase. I don't even know what it means personally. But as a parallel thread, one interest of mine with regards to notions of translations lie on the premise of codification. When you codify it in language, or the way language is used to encrypt information. Cryptanalysis, for example, was born because scholars were interested in decrypting dead languages to learn what is contained in manuscripts of a language that they do not understand or know to be. So one of the more fascinating histories to me was the birth of a written form called Al-Jamiado, which emerged in Granada during the Spanish Inquisition. So Al-Jamiado, like Jawi is a written form for Malay before the switch to Roman letters in early 20th century, is a transliteration of Spanish, which is written with Arabic letters. So texts utilizing or written utilizing Al-Jamiado were teachings of the Quran, Hadiths, in the interest of preserving knowledge. And the reason for this, as you know, is that Muslims during the time had to practice their faith in secrecy, crypto-Muslims, as they were later termed. So these texts help preserve knowledge passed down through generations. And I'm aware that this may not have much relevance to translation as we are addressing it. It speaks to the way that written language acts as a medium to preserve a community in order to practice their faith, whilst also a means of hiding from being persecuted. So jumping ahead and threading it back to cultured vulgarities and Google Translate, the tools and data sets kind of loom over us also need to be questioned in its role of oppressing language and our means of engaging with it on a deeper level. So from biases to incoherent translations, the way written and spoken language governs the way we perceive, feel, and respond is very much determined by who facilitated that exchange of information.
Yes, that's a really important reminder that, language and translation can be a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, language, so-called foreign language, can be obscure to us, but it also may be a means of survival, right, by a persecuted community, right, that can actually keep their faith and their traditions going through that obscured language, through that code. Thank you so much, Ila and Bani, for this conversation, for your very generous and insightful answers. And thanks for being here at this early hour in Singapore. Was that a siren going on in the background?
it might as well be sometimes.
Right. I mean, I would expect that in New York City, not Singapore at so early.
You do not want to get into a conversation with me about noise pollution in Singapore.
I bet you have plenty to say about noise pollution in Singapore. Anyway, Ila and Bani will return at the end of this program to perform live from Suap Lidah. So stay tuned for the end. Right now, I would just want to say a few words about the festival program that we will be presenting to you next week. So we're very excited to share with you what the festival has in store for you. The 5th Singapore Literature Festival in New York City will take place next Thursday, October 6th through Saturday, October 8th. On the very first day, Thursday afternoon, our very first event is Translation as Archipelagic Thinking. This event is a panel discussion with translator editors from many places. Christine Ong Muslim is from the Philippines. Shelley Fairweather Viga is based in Seattle, but she translates writing from Kazakhstan. They will be reading from some of their translations and engaging in a conversation with the moderator, Alter L. Price. Also on Thursday in the evening is the opening address of the festival, entitled Islands on the Road. This will take place in the People's Forum, where most of our in-person events will be held. The People's Forum is in Manhattan. The opening address, Islands on the Road, is given by the Trinidadian Scottish writer, Anthony Vani Capadeo, who will be talking and drawing inspiration from Trinidad's carnival. She will give the talk and engage in a conversation with Vivek Narayanan. On the second day of the festival, Friday, October 7th, in the afternoon, we will go to New York University to their Green Street event space for the event Diasporic Poetics. The event is a panel discussion with a number of prominent writers and scholars. Timothy Yu from America, from the US, Anthony Vani Capadeo from Trinidad and Scotland, Chris Campagnoni from the US, but also from a Latin, who will be speaking from a Latin American perspective, and also the Singaporean Malay scholar Nasri Barawi. And their conversation will be moderated by Jani Randawa. And on the second day still, Friday, but this time in the evening, we're back at the People's Forum for the panel Re-envisioning the Epic for Our Time. For this evening event, we will hear readings from the poets Jay Gao, Hamid Roslan, and Vivek Narayanan. And they will talk about the uses of epic poetry for our time with the Asian American poetry scholar, Dorothy Wong. On the third and final day of the festival, a Saturday in the afternoon, we'll have the event, Archipelagic Constellations. And this event involves writers from the South Asian diaspora, namely Gayutra Bahadur, Crystal A. Sital, and Yume Balasingham Chow. They'll be reading from their writings, from their books, and engaging in a conversation with the moderator, Lily Philpott. And the final event of the festival, taking place on Saturday in the evening at the People's Forum again, is the closing address, Free Speech in an Unequal World. The closing address is given by the Singaporean media scholar, Cherian George. And after his talk, he will be engaging in a conversation with Yume Balasingham Chow. So there we have all the events of the festival. We really hope you will join us for the festival, for both the virtual and the in-person events. To find out more about the festival events, please check out our website, singaporeunbound.org. Thank you so much for coming to this festival preview. Again, would you all give a big round of applause for our featured artists for this event, Lidah and Bani. And our appreciation and gratitude to our ASL interpreters, Brianni Barber and Dresden Lamar. Thank you so much, Brianna and Dresden. And also, finally, for a very, very special treat, we will close out this festival preview with a live performance of Suap Lidah by Lidah and Bani. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy what the artists have in store for you. Take it away, guys.
Tanpa ditampah, dipaksa, diperintah, dihalau dari masa kini tempoh hari hingga ke masa depan. Ambil rasa suara gemuruh yang biadab, beradat hanya dengan dendam, benci berendam, muka bersenyum, niat pecahkan muka terpendam. Maaf, jangan panggil peguam. Bahasaku walaupun kesat, aku cuma nak mengesat apa yang kau lepaskan di kalangan minda ini. Bahasa indah kerana tak ada arah, tak dijajah, secara biasa bergaul, mesra, berenang, bergurau senda dengan impian untuk mengarah kisah-kisah kita sehari sentiasa lidah. Merantau dengan semangat kita, arah-arahkan ku mengarah arahan pengarah. Jangan cuba nak ternakkan jiwa ini yang ingin ke mana saja. Angin dan maya berhembus bila-bila.
Bila-bila berhembus maya dan angin saja ke mana ingin yang ini jiwa bernakkan, nak cuba jangan mengarah arahan mengarah. Arahkan ku arah kita semangat dengan merantau lidah sentiasa sehari kita. Kisah-kisah mengarah untuk impian dengan senda bergurau berenang mesra bergaul. Biasa secara dijajah tak arah tak ada kerana indah bahasa. Ini minda kalangan dilepaskan kau yang apa mengesat nak cuma aku pesat walaupun bahasaku peguam panggil jangan. Maaf terpendam mukamu pecahkan niat bersenyum muka berendam benci dendam dengan hanya beradat biadab yang gemuruh suara rasa ambil depan masa hingga hari tempoh kini masa dari halau diperintah dipaksa ditampar
Arahanmu yang perintahi
hidup susah mati
muat turun kehayalan
lancang kuning mentang
tempoh
badan
masa kini tempoh
tempoh
hari yang takkan jumpa
paling lama masa bertumpang lalu
nanti ke mana arah
raja rakyat raksasa
masa depan kami dibuat
buat apa buat bodoh
rupa lidah ini kesat
1, 2, 3 lesak
kesatkan mata
buat kebuta
Tanda.
tanya siapa yang buta
mata tanda bertanda
dah lama macam gini actually
menandakan tanda tanya
nyata that the only pertandingan
bertanda dengan tangan ini ringan
that the only pertandingan is between you and yours
nak ambil semula
ambillah semua
apa yang dirampaskan oleh sejarah saya
yang bukan saya punya
bahasa indah kerana bersejarah berdampingan dengan lidah mereka penjajah, saudara mara dan jurubahasa yang idamkan menjilat merasakan alam budaya seberang masa rasa dengan berat hati saya rasa arah tujuan yang harus diperiksakan adalah hasil penjajahan yang merompakkan nilai lidah saya.
Tiada kata secantik bahasa.
And yet you always tell me,
Mulut kau masing.
and I wonder if you mean the salt of the sea,
No.
old salt.
No.
The same way that you say,
Aku dah rasa garam sebelum kau.
but what you meant was,
Do not say these things. Keep these words loose like threads with your feet. Carefully. Hati-hati when they spill out of me. Mulut masing ada rasa.
premonition, instinct, foresight.
You bisik nanti tanda.
But all I hear is tender of a ship.
Leaning or readily inclined to roll in response to the wind. We could not agree on the word for translator. I assumed Jema and stopped myself.
Eternal sunshine of the spotless machines, even if the accuracy is questionable.
Terjemah, the ter is part of the noun and not a kata imbuhan. Ter indicates a lack of control. Terjatuh,
To fall,
tertinggal,
left behind.
indicates something sudden. Terbangun,
Wake up,
indicates something of the highest position.
prettiest.
Cantik.
Not to be confused with secantik, to be on par.
Terjemah indicates something sudden, of the highest position, with a lack of control.
Traditore. The translator is a traitor.
The translator is a traitor.
All translations
Are
are
compromise.
compromise. You instead settle for juru bahasa, and I found the juru to be unsettling. Hubris.
Are we meant to be
Experts like juru rawat
nurse,
or juru terbang,
pilot?
but sayang, no one should be an expert of language, any language.
Keep it loose. Careful. Secantik. Sesama.
Sama. There will be a day, sayang, where terima kasih,
will be replaced by an awkward, anglified,
saya thank awak.
directed, pointed, defined.
But terima kasih is so ambiguous. Accept my love as I accept yours. Sama.
Thank you so much, Ila and Bani. All right, let's give them another round of applause. I really appreciate your doing this because your words have become music for me, and I hope for many people here too. And I also appreciate this glimpse into your studio when we can actually see the material reality of producing the work that you do. That is not abstract, it's not ethereal, but that we are bodies in a space, creating, all right, this beautiful work. So thank you so much, Ila and Bani, for being with us today. We look forward to playing your video to the festival at the People's Forum. And now what's left is just to say goodbye to everybody and to once more hope to see everyone at the festival, whether it is for our next virtual event or for our in-person events in the People's Forum on 37th Street in Manhattan. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.